But let's go back to Tim Walz. Do Americans remember him for the Minneapolis riots in 2020, where he waited 3 days before calling in the National Guard to stop the riots that caused massive damage and disruption?
Well, Americans absolutely remember the riots themselves. I mean, those images are iconic. Nobody has forgotten them. There are a lot of pockets in the country where people feel like they're still in, Minneapolis in 2020 because crime, violent crime in particular, has not come down. It has in certain parts of the country, but in other parts it absolutely has not. And so that feels very real to people. So when those familiar images pop up on people's screens, and people then learn Tim Walz was in charge of Minneapolis. I think whether or not they specifically remember how he handled that as governor, now they are going to say, I remember exactly how bad that was. I know we all needed the National Guard there, and I know the left was basically out to lunch and was complicit in allowing a lot of this to sweep through cities in the Midwest and basically everywhere around the country. And I will judge you accordingly. It'll be pretty easy to tie him to the tragedy and the chaos that swept Minnesota in the days after George Floyd's death.
Well, we've been speaking a bit about him. Let's hear what he had to say yesterday, being pretty quick to make some jokes that are frankly gross.
Like all regular people I grew up with in the heartland, JD studied at Yale, had his career funded by Silicon Valley billionaires, and then wrote a bestseller trashing that community. Come on! That's not what middle America is. And I gotta tell you, I can't wait to debate the guy. That is, if he's willing to get off the couch and show up. So, you see what I did there?
He's referring to a made-up joke about JD Vance, which is just gross, and it's pretty hypocritical to be making those claims when the Democratic Party seem to or pretend to care about misinformation.
I thought it was pretty stupid too. I mean, that was his debut speech in front of the nation. And so for a lot of people who look at the world and say we have very, very serious problems, do you really want to go full goofball with jokes like that? Again, just strategically, I would think no. And JD Vance probably can't wait to debate Tim Walz. In fact, I'm sure he's very eager to debate Tim Walz. We remember what happened to another Tim when, not another Tim, actually, remember what happened to JD Vance when he debated his Ohio Senate candidate. Actually, it was Tim Ryan, all kinds of Tims in American politics, but JD Vance was very capable. And so Tim Walz is riding high right now. I think you can even, he was in my home state of Wisconsin campaigning with Kamala Harris today. You can hear it in both of their voices. I mean, they're just getting fawning media coverage and they are riding really high. They feel great right now. But I think they're going to be in for a rude awakening because this can't last forever. There's no way it can. And so some of this right now is just springing from this totally outsized sense of confidence they have in their campaign. Byron York of the Washington Examiner made a great point today in his column. He said, listen, Kamala Harris has gotten some of the best media coverage you could ask for. People are very excited just that Joe Biden stepped down. And the race, even after all of that, is still basically tied. That should be the wake-up call that Democrats need right now.
Yep, that's true. There's still time to go. What do you make of the decision Kamala Harris has made? Why didn't she go with the favourite Pennsylvania governor, Josh Shapiro?
I don't think Josh Shapiro was quite as good a candidate as some people thought he was. I think Tim Walz does bring some things to the table. I mean, as much as I think it's a tough sell to say this is just your regular Midwestern guy when you put Tim Walz out there, they desperately do need that. They desperately do need to seem as though they understand, regular Midwestern voters, especially rural voters. So I see what they were thinking in their minds that Tim Walz might do for the ticket. Whether or not he's capable of accomplishing what they thought he might do for the ticket is a different question. I cannot possibly imagine why their calculation that any sort of upset they would have caused to the far left by selecting Josh Shapiro because he had volunteered with a non-combat role in the IDF and had generally been pro-Israel outweighed the fact that he is the governor of the state that could almost clinch the election on its own. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me, even with the fact that I think as much as I don't like Tim Walz, he brings some things to the table. That is such a huge thing to bring to the table. I can't imagine why they suddenly decided it wasn't worth it to go with Shapiro. Doesn't make a ton of sense to me.
Let's look at Joe Biden, who's apparently running the country until January. He's finally given his first TV interview since exiting the race. He spoke with CBS about the election campaign. This is what he had to say.
If Trump wins, no, I'm not confident at all. I mean, if Trump loses, I'm not confident at all. He means what he says. We don't take him seriously. He means it. All the stuff about if we lose, there'll be a bloodbath. Have to be a stolen election. Look what they're trying to do now in the local election districts where people count the votes. They're putting people in place in states that they're going to count the votes, right? You can't love your country only when you win.
Still making errors, still Joe Biden. It's hard to watch.
I can't get over the fact that we're not talking about every single day how this man is still the president of the United States and stepped down from the ticket, gave it to Kamala Harris, and did not concede that by doing so, in a sense, he was also conceding he should not any longer be president of the United States. Had a horrible debate performance that made everybody realize finally that there was a media cover-up, that there was a cover-up by prominent Democrats in the country. And so when you watch interviews like this one he did with Robert Costa of CBS, it just, again, it never fails to shock me that we aren't constantly talking about how to get this man out of office. I'm conservative. I don't care if he's replaced with Kamala Harris at this point. The man can barely stay awake through an interview. So again, just totally shocking and really, really sad. Like you said, it's hard to watch. It's sad to watch as an American.
It's so concerning. We've got the next 6 months where he's supposed to be president. It's not a short amount of time.
No, and it's a constitutional crisis every single day until he steps down because we know that he isn't capable. We know that's actually why the 25th Amendment exists, to handle situations just like this one. So yeah, it's obviously something that should be weighing on the minds of many, many Americans. It is, but the media, again, has totally moved on from it and is not even having that conversation anymore, despite the fact that he's coming in front of their cameras and talking like the way he just talked to Bob Costa. It sounds like he can't stay awake for a basic interview.
Yeah, it's so painful to watch. Emily Jashinsky, Unheard DC correspondent, thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour.
Thank you.